Let me ask you something. And this time, don't rush to answer. Don't answer with the story you've been telling everyone else. Don't answer with the version of yourself that's learned how to sound confident while feeling uncertain inside. Answer me from that quiet place within you, the place that speaks only when the world finally goes silent, the place that tells the truth late at night when distractions fade and you're left alone with your thoughts, because the question is simple, but the answer is uncomfortable. Why are you still here? Why are you still living a life that feels smaller than what you know, without a doubt, you're capable of? Why do you wake up in the morning with ambition burning in your chest, ideas racing through your mind, visions of more pulling at your heart, yet somehow go to sleep at night with regret sitting heavy in your stomach, replaying the same promises you made to yourself and didn't keep, the same opportunities you hesitated on, the same moments where you chose safety over growth, because this is the part no one wants to talk about. You are not lazy, you are not broken, you are not unmotivated, and you are not lacking potential. You are conditioned, deeply conditioned, trained by repetition, reinforced by environment, rewarded for playing small and punished for standing out. Conditioned to choose safety over possibility, conditioned to lower your expectations so you won't feel disappointment, conditioned to confuse being busy with making progress and being comfortable with being happy, conditioned to mistake familiarity for fulfillment, and from the moment you were young, before you even realized what was happening, you were trained to fit in instead of stand out, trained to follow rules instead of question them, trained to seek approval instead of self-respect, trained to survive instead of thrive, and somewhere along the way, you didn't suddenly lose your dreams in a dramatic moment. You didn't wake up one day without ambition. You negotiated with your dreams quietly, slowly, rationally, telling yourself it was temporary, telling yourself it was practical, telling yourself it was responsible, saying maybe later, when I'm more confident, when I'm more prepared, when the timing is right, when things settle down, when I have more money, when I have more support. And the most dangerous part is that every one of those excuses sounded reasonable. And while you were waiting for the perfect moment, time kept moving, years passed, opportunities expired, and the gap between who you are and who you know you could be grew wider and heavier. So let me be absolutely clear with you right now. There's no such thing as the right time. There never was, and there never will be. There is only the time you decide. Because most people don't fail because they aim too high. They fail because they aim too low and hit it. They fail because they set goals that don't challenge their identity, dreams that don't require transformation, standards that don't force growth, and they end up settling, not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, for a job that drains their energy instead of fuels their spirit, for a routine that numbs their mind instead of sharpens it, for relationships that feel familiar instead of fulfilling, for a life that feels predictable instead of powerful. And the most terrifying part is not the settling itself. It's how convincing it becomes, how easy it is to label it as fine, how normal it feels to wake up, go through the motions. Distract yourself with noise and tell yourself this is just how life is, while deep down you feel the truth every time you scroll past someone who had the courage to live boldly, every time you see someone who decided to go all in while you hesitated, every time you imagine the life you could be living if fear wasn't making your decisions, every time your heart races at the thought of change, and your mind immediately starts listing reasons why now isn't the time, why you're not ready yet, why it's risky, why it's unrealistic, and that tension you feel in your chest, that frustration that shows up when you're alone, that quiet anger you feel toward yourself that you try to drown out with distractions, that is not weakness, that is not negativity, that is not dissatisfaction for no reason. That is your potential screaming for expression, because here's the truth most people never fully understand. Confidence does not come before action. It never has and it never will. Confidence is a result, not a prerequisite. You don't wake up one day feeling confident and then decide to take the leap. You take the leap while feeling uncertain, afraid, and unprepared. And confidence is built on the other side of action. And every human being on this planet, without exception, is driven by two primary forces: the desire to gain pleasure and the desire to avoid pain. And right now, whether you like it or not, the pain of staying the same has not yet outweighed the pain of change. The pain of regret has not yet become greater than the pain of fear. So let me ask you the question that has the power to change everything, if you're honest enough to answer it. What is staying the same costing you, not someday, not in theory, but right now, because it's costing you time you'll never get back? It's costing you self-respect every time you don't keep a promise to yourself. It's costing you momentum, energy, belief in the life you were meant to live. And here's the truth that either wakes you up or makes you deeply uncomfortable. If nothing changes, not your circumstances, not your results, not how you feel about yourself, because your habits are shaping your destiny, whether you're conscious of them or not. Your standards are determining your future, whether you've chosen them intentionally or inherited them unconsciously. And you don't get what you want in life, you get what you tolerate, you get what you accept, you get what you repeatedly allow, So if you want your life to change, you must raise your standards, not tomorrow, not next year, not when you feel more motivated, but now, because life changes the moment your standards change, not when your goals change, not when your wishes change, but when what you demand of yourself, regardless of how you feel, changes. When you decide what you are no longer willing to tolerate, when you choose consciously and deliberately who you are becoming. Because identity drives behavior far more powerfully than motivation ever will. And if you see yourself as someone who tries, you will try and stop when it gets uncomfortable. But if you see yourself as someone who commits, you will find a way when obstacles appear. And once you eliminate alternatives, once you stop giving yourself an escape route, once you burn the boats behind you and decide that quitting is no longer an option, that comfort is no longer your highest priority. That growth is the price you're willing to pay. Everything begins to shift. Not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because you become stronger, more focused, more resilient. And yes, it will be hard. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. And yes, fear will show up louder than ever, but courage has never meant the absence of fear. Courage has always meant action in the presence of fear, moving forward while your hands shake, choosing growth while your mind doubts. And when you begin to consistently change your physiology, how you move, how you breathe, how you carry yourself. Change your focus, what you consistently think about, what you look for, what you expect, and change your language, the words you use to describe your life, your challenges, and yourself. Your life cannot stay the same because you are not here by accident. You were not born just to survive, pay bills, and repeat the same year over and over again. You were born to create, to contribute, to expand, to become more than you are today. And the moment you fully accept responsibility for your life, not blame, not excuses, not circumstances, is the moment you step into your power. So make the decision not to be perfect, not to be fearless, but to be relentless, because one decision, one moment of courage, one standard raised is all it takes to change the direction of your entire life. And here's where most people miss it, because they think the decision is the finish line when in reality it's only the starting gun. Because deciding once doesn't change your life. Deciding daily does. Deciding in the moments when no one is cheering, when progress feels invisible, when the old habits are pulling harder than the new vision, because this is where identity is tested. Not in the spotlight, but in solitude. Not when it's exciting, but when it's repetitive. Because repetition is where power is built and boredom is where most people quit. And that's why average lives are crowded and extraordinary lives are rare, because very few people are willing to do the boring, unsexy, uncomfortable things long enough for greatness to compound. And let me tell you something that may sting, but will set you free. Your life right now is perfectly designed to match the identity you're operating from, not the identity you talk about, not the identity you admire, but the one you reinforce. Because every action you take is a vote for the type of person you believe you are. And when those votes stack up, they become your character, and your character becomes your destiny. So if you want to change your destiny, you don't start with motivation, you start with conditioning, because the strongest force in human behavior is not desire, it's habit. And habits are not broken by willpower, they are replaced by systems, rituals, and environments that make the right behavior inevitable, which means if you keep relying on willpower, you will keep losing to fatigue, stress, and emotion. Because willpower is limited, but identity is not. And once you see yourself as someone who follows through, someone who does what they say they will do, someone who honors commitments even when it hurts, the behavior stops being a debate and becomes an expression of who you are. And this is why the most powerful question you can ever ask is not, what should I do, but who must I become? Because when you change the who, the what becomes automatic. And becoming is not an overnight event, it's a daily practice. It's waking up and deciding that today you will act like the future version of yourself, even if your emotions are still catching up. Because emotions follow motion, confidence follows action, belief follows evidence, and your morning rituals matter, your self-talk matters. The people you surround yourself with matter, because you are constantly being conditioned, either by design or by default. And if you don't consciously design your days, your environment will design them for you, pulling you toward comfort, distraction, and mediocrity, because those are the easiest paths. But easy paths lead to hard lives, and hard paths lead to easy lives. And the difference is not talent or luck. It's the willingness to do hard things early so you don't have to suffer later, because suffering is inevitable, but you get to choose the type. Discipline now or regret later, effort now or resentment later, growth now or stagnation later. And the most dangerous thing in the world is not failure, it's success without fulfillment, because that's what happens when you chase outcomes instead of becoming someone you respect. Because achievement without identity alignment leaves you empty, but growth aligned with values gives you energy, clarity, and purpose. And purpose is what fuels resilience when life punches back. Because it will, challenges will come, setbacks will happen, doubt will whisper. But when you are anchored to a vision bigger than your comfort, you don't break, you adapt, you adjust, you rise, because resilience is not toughness, it's meaning. It's knowing why you're doing what you're doing. And when your why is strong enough, the how reveals itself, because clarity is not found in thinking, it's found in movement, experimentation, action, feedback, refinement. And every step you take, even the wrong ones, teach you something if you're willing to learn instead of quit, because failure is not the opposite of success, it's part of it. And the only real failure is stopping, because the moment you stop, you guarantee the outcome you fear. But if you keep moving, you give yourself a chance to grow, evolve, and transcend the limits you once believed were permanent, because limits are learned, not fixed. And what has been learned can be unlearned, rewired, replaced. And once you realize that, you stop seeing yourself as broken and start seeing yourself as trainable, moldable, expandable. And that shift alone can change everything, because now you're no longer asking what's wrong with me. You're asking what's possible for me if I stay committed. And that question opens doors your old mindset could never see, because possibility expands behavior, and expanded behavior creates expanded results. And suddenly the life that once felt impossible starts feeling inevitable. Not because it's easy, but because you were no longer negotiating with a version of yourself that wants to stay small. And this is where the real separation happens. Because once you stop negotiating with weakness, life starts testing your commitment, not to punish you, but to prove to you who you really are. Because growth will always demand a higher version of you than the one who started the journey. And that's why the early excitement fades, the applause disappears, and the road gets quiet. Because silence is where identity either collapses or crystallizes. And most people misinterpret resistance as a sign to stop, when in reality it is confirmation that they are finally doing something that matters. Because resistance only shows up when you threaten an old pattern, an old identity, an old comfort zone that has kept you safe but small. And the moment you understand that discomfort is not danger but data, everything changes. Because now, instead of avoiding discomfort, you study it, you lean into it, you ask yourself what it's here to teach you, because every emotional spike, fear, doubt, frustration, impatience is a signal pointing to growth. And the people who win at life are not the ones who feel less fear, they're the ones who have trained themselves to act in spite of it. Because courage is not the absence of fear, it's the decision that something else is more important than fear, and that something is your future, your integrity, your self-respect. Because self-respect is built in moments when no one is watching, and quitting would be easy. And let me be clear, discipline is not punishment, discipline is self-love in its highest form. Because it's the part of you that says, I care enough about my future to do what my present self doesn't want to do. And once you reframe discipline that way, it stops feeling like force and starts feeling like alignment, because you're no longer fighting yourself, you're guiding yourself, training yourself, shaping yourself with intention. The same way an athlete trains their body or a master trains their craft. Because mastery is not talent, it's devotion. It's showing up even when progress is microscopic. Because microscopic progress compounded over time becomes massive transformation. And this is where patience becomes power, because patience is not waiting passively, it's persisting actively, trusting the process while executing relentlessly, analyzing it, replaying worst-case scenarios, reliving past failures, reinforcing identities they've already outgrown. But you can interrupt that pattern. You can condition yourself to focus on solutions, to ask empowering questions, to prime your nervous system for strength instead of fear. Because the questions you ask shape the answers you find, and the answers you find shape the actions you take, and the actions you take shape your life. And this is why successful people guard their mental environment so fiercely, because they understand that mindset is not positive thinking, it's trained thinking, and training requires structure, repetition, and feedback, not hope. And once you start training your mind the same way you would train your body, you stop being surprised by your reactions, you stop being hijacked by emotion, you stop collapsing under pressure, because pressure reveals preparation. And when you've prepared mentally, pressure becomes fuel instead of a threat. And this is where confidence becomes quiet, grounded, unshakable, not loud, not arrogant, but stable, because it's built on evidence, on thousands of small moments where you showed up anyway. And eventually that confidence changes how you move, how you speak, how you decide, and people feel it, not because you tell them, but because energy never lies and suddenly opportunities align, not magically, but logically, because you are now the type of person who notices them, who acts on them, who follows through. And this is the final truth most people never realize. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And once your systems are aligned with a powerful identity, success stops being something you chase and starts being something you express, because you are no longer trying to become someone else. You are finally becoming yourself, the disciplined version, the courageous version, the committed version, the version that doesn't wait for permission or perfect conditions, the version that understands that time is not something you have, it's something you use, and every day you delay is a day you never get back. And one day the pain of staying the same will outweigh the pain of change, but the people who win don't wait for that day. They choose change now, consciously, deliberately, relentlessly, and they keep choosing it until it becomes who they are. And when that happens, the question is no longer, can I do this? But how could I ever go back? Because once you taste self-respect, once you feel what it's like to live in alignment with your potential, mediocrity becomes unbearable. Excuses sound hollow, and quitting is no longer an option, not because it's forbidden, but because it no longer fits the identity you've built. And that is the moment you stop surviving and start commanding your life.